Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 49 of SuperSports, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of exotic, high-performance cars, which, for the most part at least, nestle quite nicely between sports car and full-on supercar. And in this particular pick, we're actually featuring a vehicle that we've featured on the channel before, in a review series. This was in fact the very first episode, of course, of the Dark series. And the reason why it was included in that series was actually the reason for the whole series. It was that car that gave me the idea of the Dark series, because it was a vehicle which was actually really cool to drive, but that feels kind of underappreciated. You don't see a huge amount of people using it. In fact, you see relatively few people actually using this car. Now, I personally believe that that's going to change in the future of Gran Turismo, and many of the points that we'll touch on now will probably be fairly similar to those that I mentioned in the Dark series. Now, this car, for the most part, is not really an upgradable vehicle. There are a couple of things that you can do to it, but not as far as weight and power, which of course are really the most important things. That's a shame, because it really limits this car's range of competitive effectiveness. It means that the car is as good as it is, and that's all you have to work with. There are, of course, other vehicles like that as well. The Tajima E-Runner, for instance. What you get is what you get, and you have to work with that. This car is very good, though. Don't let the fact that it cannot be upgraded put you off, because this is an excellent super sports car. At the very least, for just being fun to drive. Because on Gran Turismo, of course, everything can always seem to be about being the fastest or being the best. Whereas a big part of racing games, for me personally, and I know for a lot of you guys as well, is just driving. Just enjoying driving cars. Cars that you like. Cars that are, well, obviously enjoyable to drive. They're fun. They don't necessarily need to be the fastest. They're just inherently appealing, and those cars can be completely different for different people. This car has that factor, and the fact that you cannot upgrade it actually highlights that even more, because many other cars which can have extreme upgrades kind of become defined by those upgrades. Cars become known for a certain thing rather than an overall package. For instance, if I say the word Huayra, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Pure speed. You don't think of it as a fun car, you think of it as a fast car. Whereas if I say NSX, for instance, in this form, you think, oh, it can't be upgraded, but it sure is fun to drive. So the fact that it can't be upgraded actually helps you to focus on the fun factor a bit more. Now, obviously, it would be nice if we could upgrade the car, but at the moment that's just not an option. And you can buy this car from both the Honda and Acura dealerships for 1 million credits apiece. Now, as far as I'm aware, and as far as I can remember, they're both exactly the same, so it really doesn't matter which one you buy, just support whichever brand you want. Personally, I bought the Honda version. This car can be painted, which is very cool for a concept car, and that is kind of a redeeming feature as well, because having the option to paint the car instead of tuning at least does kind of make up for that a little bit. It adds a bit more personalisation. Now, as far as raw spec, we're not given all of the information about this car. We do, however, have some information. We're not told, for instance, how large the engine is, but we do know that it's a naturally aspirated hybrid between petrol, mid-mounted motor and electric motors, and the car is all-wheel drive overall. The PP is 559 with an oil change, and with said oil change, the power sits at 590. We don't know what the torque is, and the weight is 1,350 kilos, which, considering that we cannot upgrade it, is not bad at all, actually, especially for an all-wheel drive hybrid. As far as horsepower per tonne, it has 437, which doesn't sound that great, especially for a super sports exotic, but you do have to bear in mind that this car is not upgraded. If you compare this to its main rivals with the same state of tune, in other words essentially stock, then they're only going to have a similar kind of horsepower per tonne, in some cases maybe even not as good. So, in perspective, that's actually not bad. Now, 1 million credits is a lot, and I've mentioned, of course, in the Visions of Tomorrow Vision Gran Turismo series, that many of those cars cost more than they really should. So is that the case with this vehicle? because is being fun really worth 1,000,000 credits? Well, there are a few things to bear in mind either way. If you're looking purely to win races, then 1,000,000 credits isn't really the best investment for you with this car, because although it's certainly not bad, it's quite simply not the best car you can get for the money or for the PP level. It is what it is, and it's good at what it is, but that's it. You can't go beyond that. Now, as far as actual performance, this is actually an excellent car, and people often forget this, but the top speed on this car is excellent for its power. It does around 235 miles per hour, and for its horsepower and the fact that you can't tune it, that is very impressive. And it's yet another reason why I personally believe that in the future of Gran Turismo this will be a hero car, like the Stingray has been in GT6, like the Ford GT was in GT4, etc. I think this is going to be one of those flagship models that really breaks ground for production vehicles in a newer game. Maybe GT Sport, maybe later, but I guarantee this is going to be one of the quickest cars in the game when we finally get the production model available with upgrades. I would expect at least 800 or 900 horsepower from this thing, and given its existing speed, it could easily be up there with stuff like the Corvette Stingray, but representing Acura or Honda instead, which would be nice for those fans of those companies. Now, for 1,000,000 credits, we've said you get a decent top speed for the power, but not necessarily the most competitive range of a SuperSports model. What else is there notable? Well, the handling, I would say, is very good. As long as you keep the camber neutral, the handling is very good, in fact. The boost system from the motors actually helps you to get out of corners even better than many cars with significantly more upgrades. But the main downside of this car, I would say, apart from obviously the fact that it can't be upgraded, is the brakes. They are stock, you can't do anything about that, and the brakes do need to be worked harder than you would in a tuned car, because although they're not bad, they don't stop the car as quickly as you'd like. So you do need to bear in mind that you need to brake a lot earlier than you usually would. Overall, this is a kind of car which, like a few others, really depends on what kind of driver you are. If you like the look of the car, if you want a fun car, something just to drive irrelevant of how good or bad it is, then you'll enjoy it. I personally love this car. If you're looking purely to win races, it's probably not the car for you. But that's it overall for this particular episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.